The night a man was standing in our kitchen. This isn't my story, it's my dad's. He told me about it years ago, and I've never forgotten it. He said it happened a few years before I was born. He and my mom had just gotten married and were living together for the first time. The house was out in the countryside, far from any neighbors. It felt private, but also lonely. It had a lot of glass windows, and my dad always said that mattered later. One night, my dad woke up thirsty. My mom was still asleep, so he got up quietly and walked down the hallway to the kitchen. He didn't want to wake her. When he turned the corner into the kitchen, he saw a man standing there, dressed in black, completely still, right in the middle of the room. My dad froze. He told me he couldn't even think, just stared for a second before the fear took over. Then he screamed as loud as he could. The man ran out the door. Without thinking, my dad ran after him into the tall grass outside, shouting for him to stop. He says the grass was wet and cold, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was getting the man away from the house. Then he heard a gunshot. My dad says the sound ripped through the night. The man had a gun and fired into the air. That was when my dad realized how serious this was. He stopped chasing and ran back inside. By the time he got back, my mom was awake, crying and asking what had happened. My dad tried to explain, but his voice was gone from screaming. My mom called the police. A patrol car arrived shortly after, and because my dad could barely speak, my mom had to tell the officer everything. The officer said they'd keep a car watching the house for a while. For the next few nights, my dad barely slept. The patrol car showed up sometimes, but most of the time, the officer on duty was asleep. My dad couldn't relax. He stayed up himself, sitting in the middle of the living room with a baseball bat, watching the glass walls, convinced the man could be out there, watching him. He said he felt like every shadow was someone standing there, waiting. Even during the day, my dad says he felt on edge. Every creak of the floor, every movement outside made him jump. He didn't feel safe until they moved. But even then, he says he never stopped thinking about the man and the way he could have just come back any night. My dad says those days were the scariest of his life. Not the gunshot, not even the man standing in the kitchen, but knowing someone had been inside their home, close enough to reach them without any reason, and then just leaving. He told me he can still remember the feeling of being watched, the way the glass windows reflected the dark outside, and the helplessness of knowing there was nothing he could do to stop it. The man never came back, and the police never found him. But my dad says he'll never forget those nights, and neither will my mom. They moved on, but the memory stayed with them, like a shadow over the first part of their life together.